Jennifer here from Belladonna's Botanicals, and today I want to talk a little bit about how magic works. Because again, a lot of my videos I do are based on like common questions I get or things that I see and conversations I'm having with other occultists. And this one, especially to people who are more like newcomers to any, regardless of path, who are new to magical practices, the occult, ritual, spell work, and all things metaphysical. I just wanted to give a few some factors into, and this is going to pertain to mostly to spells and rituals, but the different factors in how to approach working with magic and what you can expect from that. So the first thing I want to say, and I'm going to go into a little bit background, is okay, this is not Hollywood. Throw all your favorite TV show magic, your cinematic magic, and how it's been portrayed out the window. That's not the reality. And if you're expecting that, you're going to be sorely disappointed. Because sometimes magic is actually kind of boring and tedious. If you're like, it's not always, a thrill a minute. But that's the other thing. That's the first thing. The second thing is there are a lot of occult influencers and content creators that are going to make big promises and like bulletproof results and all sorts of things. And I can tell you from that, the vast majority of divination I do for clients is to find out whether or not that spell they paid for or ritual was done and if it's actually working. And sometimes I have to do this for people I know, for colleagues and stuff like that, I have to have what's the word I'm looking for? I have to kind of look at it going, okay, yes, I know this person's work, but kind of an unbiased approach to it. Because they may very well have done the work exactly as specified, but there could be a whole host of reasons as to why you're not seeing results, because there's a lot of variables and factors that come into play. So one of the things, bear with me for a minute, I'm going to give you a little backstory into the life of Jen. I have a degree in art history. In that, I learned ways of seeing and interpreting based upon that. So when I look at a piece of art, and I should have brought a prop for that, but when I look at something, it's not just spewing out the facts of the painting of this was done by Picasso in 1902 in France, and it's called blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's some basic boilerplate details, whatever. It's to identify it. And it's in such and such museum, yakety schmackety. But when you get into looking at the painting, now I can look up an entire host of, art historians and what they think of the painting and what their interpretation of it is. I can, kind of look at that and compare and contrast. Is that how I see it? Now, I'm not going to regurgitate. I might reference points from there, but I'm not going to regurgitate that because that's not my words and how I look at it. So learning the ways of seeing, and also the ways of seeing is there's no one singular viewpoint. Like my art history thesis was on the difference between Eastern and Western views of veiling, because I was focusing on a series of photographs by an Iranian artist, Shirin Nashat, called The Women of Allah, which I think was done in the 90s. And what I found fascinating in my studies on this is, at the time, now this was, I graduated almost 20 years ago, But how we view women in the Middle East and their head coverings and veils is very different than when you look at it through Western eyes of the veiled bride, the veiled, the Virgin Mary and things like that, that it has an entirely different context with that. And one is kind of, you kind of have something that's, well, there's no problem with this, but oh, that's oppressive. So, not to get into politics of it or anything, but that's just kind of being able to look at something from different viewpoints is really key. And to not be regurgitating what any art historian thinks and to have your own independent interpretation of something that might be based on, when I was doing that, I needed to do a deep dive and understand, because she was an Iranian exile or expatriate, I forget what. She was exiled from Iran around as maybe a child or teenager. And I had to really look deeply into, the Iranian Revolution of 1979. And that, the cultural impact of that and how things changed to get a deeper understanding of the messages she was portraying in this photography series. So there's a lot of different ways of seeing. Am I going to rely on the book to tell me this is what this painting means and never deviate from that? Or am I going to look at this and say, well, I see something different here. My interpretation of it is different. Or, as time goes on, interpretations can change in, the social and cultural mores changes and things like that. So you might look at something, if you're looking at a painting that was done in 1672 through the lens of someone in 2023, you're going to have a very different sort of, based on your lived experience and visual frame of reference, it's going to be very different than it was at the time that it was created. So that said, art history lesson aside, that's how I approach Magick, though, is that I've got my handy dandy book and I never deviate from the book, or I follow this, brand name, influencer or creator, and I do everything as they do because somehow anything else is either wrong or not going to work. Now, I might incorporate things from multiple sources. I'm a gigantic book nerd. I read a lot and I watch a lot of YouTube videos because I love to incorporate multiple perspectives into my practice. And there might be, while I might not follow the whole ritual to the T, there might be one little thing from that I'm like, hey, that's pretty cool. And I might incorporate that into something else. So as I often stress in my videos, it's finding what works for you. So now, first and foremost, and when we're getting into any type of spell or ritual work, you really want to assess the variables, because that's sometimes going to determine your course of action and anything that you really need to troubleshoot. And we're talking about the basics, the who, what, when, where, why of it. What your intention of this spell or ritual is. Are there other people involved in it? Because if you are doing magic against someone else who is also another magic practitioner, you're going to have to figure out how to break through all their protections, all their return to sender and defensive magic. And if they know you're coming at them or trying to do magic on them, they may have countermeasures in place. So how are you going to do that? And even if they don't, people will have spirit guides and ancestors and protector spirits, guardian angels, etc., that are often going to intervene on their behalf. I've had that happen. And some people are naturally curse resistant, or more, or may only have vulnerabilities in some areas but not others. That's something you need to take into consideration in what you're doing. May or may not work, as you're not going to get the bulletproof results that you might be looking for if you're doing this against some person with no magical background or no connection to anything. So That's a factor to consider. Some people have very strong wills, so being able to, whether they're practicing magic or not, you may not be able to bend their will to get the results of the spell or ritual that you are desiring. And what I run into more often than not are these two things: is a karmic lesson that needs to be learned, or having the mirror shot and going, hey, you know what, before this to happen, you need to work on yourself and fix these things first, and do some self-work and shadow work before we can proceed. Those are the two things that I run into the most. So thinking about that when you're going to a spell work, what all things do you have to, like, really thinking about it? Like, I want to manifest money. Well, okay, how is that going to happen? Or I want to find my soulmate. How's that going to happen? Get your ex back thing. How's that going to happen if they're happily married to someone else and, have, kids and a family and stuff? You're going to have to do a lot of other things to separate that out. So it's not just do one spell, set it, forget it, done, magical nuke set, and you're good to go. You may have to do multi-layered spell work, which I will get to later in this video. So in this basic process, I recommend seeking guidance. And this can be from multiple sources. I will seek guidance from my spirit guides. I will seek guidance from the spirits that I work with. Whatever you work with in your pantheon, I mean, it might be different, like, generally speaking, I would probably work with Lucifer and Lilith, but if it's something money related, I usually work with Mammon. But that doesn't mean you need to work with Mammon, because you might not feel a connection to that. You might be better suited working with Clownneck or Bune, or Suntalak. There's other entities that are good for the money stuff. I prefer working with Mammon. So you can, ask your peers what they think, as a sort of a second opinion. I would try not to find someone who's just gonna blow smoke up your ass, because that's often gonna misdirect you. I mean, I think there's a point at which, when we're doing things, you even though you want the honest truth, you still kind of want to be told what you want to hear. So I'm here not to tell you what you want to hear in this video, because sometimes your spells are just not going to work. Doesn't matter who does them for you. Doesn't matter what you do. They're just not going to work. And there's a lot of variables and factors as to why that may be. The next thing when we're seeking guidance is divination. This can be as simple as doing a pendulum reading, yes, no, using dowsing rods. You can do a full tarot reading, anything like that, that can help you decide what the best approach is in the situation. And sometimes you might not need to do any magic at all. Sometimes it's a matter of being patient. Or that, there's just a reason why now is not the right time for this. So the next thing you want to do is kind of come up with your plan. Now, I mentioned before about a multi-layered approach. Sometimes it's easier, it might be more time consuming, is that you might have to do more spells, but sometimes to break through, like if you're doing something and you're dealing with someone who is a magical practitioner or has, a very strong will, you might need to do something that, breaks down those defenses. You might need to do something that breaks through those protections, so that you're not getting automatically hit with a return to sender, because chances are you're going to get hit with some type of return to sender work. So not only that, you got to preliminary buffer up your protections to count as countermeasures to that. So you're kind of seeing where at some point in time it's like, is this really worth it? Because you're just kind of, you know, throwing the same paper plane back and forth and no one's catching it. So what you'll start to see here as you're planning in this is, do you need to do a multi-layered approach? Do you need to, if you are doing a spell to go see your soul, to find your soulmate. Okay, that's great. But what are you doing to meet your soulmate? Chances are you're not going to meet your soulmate on the sofa watching TV. Believe me, I've been trying for years. Anyways, but if you're using a dating app, you might want to do some glamour magic around, or do some magic to draw in the ideal partner through those dating apps. Or, if you're not, going out and doing something socially where you can meet people, in that sense. So you kind of have to think of things in these different layers. I know this is totally not fun. It sounds like we're making like a spreadsheet and some flow charts and shit like that, but kind of are. If you really want to get into how magic works, so it's not just yakety schmackety boom boom and you've got your Prince Charming on your doorstep. So there's times where you do spells that are set it and forget it. Sometimes that depends on the entity you work with. Like I find with Santa Muerte, she's you ask once, you don't need to ask twice. But you're going to start seeing this. And as you experiment with things more, like if you're doing a multi-layered approach, let's see how all those things work. Because I know if I'm doing, usually like if I have issues with someone, I'm probably going to do a freezer spell first, just to be like, leave me alone, just to kind of block their energy, or effect. And I find sometimes I don't have to do more than that. That's more than enough. From there, I might move on to other things, working with the servitor, or, to detect any type of, magical workings that are going against me or things like that. So not everyone has to worry about it. I'd be willing to bet that probably about 75% of the time, if not more, that you're like, oh my God, I'm being cursed. You're probably actually not being cursed, but because it takes a lot of work to curse someone. And you better be worth it. Granted, there's some people out there that would, curse their couch for stubbing their toe on it, but I digress. So as you start doing the spell work, if you've taken a multi-layer approach, you might see, okay, what's the next step in the progression? Okay, so you've done your, soulmate, find my soulmate spell, and you've done your glamour magic, and maybe someone liked you on one of the apps, or you met someone and got their phone number. You might want to do something, maybe not to speed it up, but to kind of influence things in your favor. So it might be just a slow approach. Instead of dropping everything all at once, gradually building through it. Because I think sometimes when you do things all at once, you might get the desired results, but they can be more flash in a pan and more, you might get what you want, but it's not really what you want at the end of the day. I've had that happen a lot. So as you're working through the planning phase too, think about who you want to work with. If you're working with any type of spirits, your guides, ancestors, whatever, think about the best entity for you to work with. Now, like Lucifer and Lilith, that's my matron deity, so that's usually who I go to for things. But sometimes, I work with other ones on for specific reasons, or I might be drawn to, or that's, like I said, I work with Bamman a lot for like money stuff. So do you need to flip through every single book to find the right one? If that works for you, yes. I'm not saying don't do that. But look at who you're drawn to. I know I don't particularly do money magic with like Asmodeus or Belial, but I know some people do. And that's what they're guided to do, and that's what works for them. I'm not gonna say that that's wrong, or, it might not be my approach, but doing what works for me. So, the types of spells are going to vary wildly based on just those preliminary things. I can't say pick this spell from this book and use it every time in this exact situation, because it's honestly going to be hit or miss. It's There's going to be no spell that you get the exact same results every single time you use it. Because the situations are going to vary wildly. I mean, unless you're doing it on the literal exact same thing, maybe. But things change, and you have to be very specific about what you want to manifest. And there's the whole "be careful what you wish for" thing. But there's no real scientific formula that's going to dictate, in case of this, use this spell, and you're going to get this outcome every time you use this spell. No, you're not. I'm sorry. So, and as we're talking about outcomes, that's the biggest thing. And I would probably say, and I did another video on this recently about divine timing. I think probably the number one question I get is, how long will it take for this spell to work, this ritual to work, this product to work, etc. And a lot of times people are really unrealistically impatient. Like, I've had customers buy a product, I ship them the product. So say it gets there, I ship it on, the 5th, it gets there on the 10th. On the 11th, they want to return it because it didn't work. Did I tell you it was going to take 24 hours to work? No, that's your expectations that, we're in some, abracadabra Sabrina world and things magically, manifest like that. Because again, there's no anyone, and I'm sorry, and I will say this, and if you're offended by this, I would say this even about colleagues who say this. There are no guarantees. There are zero guarantees on the timeline of the outcome and the actuality of the outcome. And if people are saying, "Oh, bulletproof guaranteed," blah blah blah, they are 100% full of, because you can't guarantee that, because variables and factors exist. The best magicians in the world can't, manifest the things that they say they can. Like, I mean, I've seen people be like, "Oh yeah, I've death cursed this person, this person, this person, this person." I'm like, they're kind of still alive, apparently. So how do those bulletproof results work again as guarantees? Because it seems like if you can't manifest your own death curses on someone, you might be a little full of shit. Just saying. Dramatic hair flip. I think it might be my signature thing. Dramatic hair flip. You can tell I grew up in the 80s. So there's no timelines. There's no guarantees. And in the video I did on the divine timing, I've had things manifest in half an hour. I've had things take months. I've had things just never manifest. Or I've had the slow roll manifest, where it's like manifesting on such a low level, but constantly building, that you don't notice it until like 6 months later. And you're like, "Oh, hey, that did kind of work." Now, the two things that I run into the most when it comes to outcomes is the yes and no, it kind of worked but didn't, of the karmic lesson you need to learn in that, and if there's any shadow work or self work you need to do in that particular area. And that's going to hit a lot more on like any type of love spell magic, because a lot of times those are karmic relationships, and there's lessons to be learned in that, in your own personal evolution. And boy howdy, has the universe been pantsing me on that one in the past few years. But it's like I spent all my time wanting to get back together with a particular ex, and I was just like so focused on this, but I was focused on it that I didn't see the person who was already in front of me. And then, I got together with that person. Things didn't really work out because guess what? It was a karmic relationship and I had some karmic lessons to learn and I've been in the process of learning those ever since. So Jen doesn't do love magic right now. And I don't think I don't know if I ever will again. But most of the magic that I'm doing is to learn those karmic lessons. So while I may not be doing love spell rituals, I'm working with my spirit guides. I'm doing, past life, regression or channeling or things like that, working to heal some of those, karmic imbalances and things that are, and learning the lessons of going, oh, okay, I get this now. So, and sometimes it's self-work. Like Santa Muerte held that mirror up to me over the summer because I was doing, after the other relationship ended, I was kind of like, but I want to get back together. I want everything to be healed and us to be friends at least, and blah, blah, blah. And I kept doing all this stuff. And here's where divination comes in handy. I had a tarot reading, and it was funny because there was a card that came up that represented, Santa Muerte, and she looked up at me and she's like, are you doing too much love magic right now? I'm like, maybe. She's like, yeah, you don't need to be. You don't need to be doing this stuff every day. You're not, you're like, I felt like I was annoying Santa Muerte by constantly asking for the exact same thing every day, because desperation makes us impatient and want immediate results. And what I realized in that, the karmic lesson and the shadow work I needed to do was around relational trauma healing and some things having to do with my own addictive personality. Now, maybe not pertaining to drugs and alcohol, but sort of across the board. So what have I been doing? I've been doing that self-work and that shadow work and learning those karmic lessons. So did my spell work? No, it did not, but I learned a lesson out of it. And the spirit world, your spirit guides love to teach you lessons. So be prepared for that. Your spell may not work, but you may walk away with it with some of the most valuable lessons you have learned in your life. So it's not a failure if you've learned something. So, and the other thing when it comes to outcomes, you just need to accept sometimes that things are not possible. I get some weird requests sometimes, and I'm like, no, I cannot make you a potion that's going to turn you into a werewolf like werewolves are in the movies. You can. There are people who are into lycanthropy, whether it be in a cosplay sense or, maybe they're a werewolf in the astral realm or in a werewolf realm. I don't know. It's not my area of expertise, but I'm not going to be able to make you a potion that's going to turn you into a freaking werewolf howling at the moon. Because while there's lore about it, but there's a lot of lore is just kind of based on shit that people made up during the witchcraft trials on the Spanish Inquisition and stuff like that. So, is it possible to turn someone into a werewolf? Maybe, but doubtfully in the way that you're thinking. Probably not. So, it's again, if you're approaching this in, as Hollywood and TV shows dictate magic and witchcraft and the occult and working with any type of spirits or demons or whatever, you're going to be sorely disappointed because it's not like that at all. I mean, it'd be cool if it was. Sorry, I got warm and I had to take myself. But yeah, it's just not. And I hate to burst anyone's bubble expecting that, but I'm not here to blow smoke up your ass. Because I don't like having smoke blown up my ass, because I'm just gonna back in your face. Because I'm a lady like that. Moving on. My advice, well, the first part of my advice anyways, is experiment. What works for me may not work for you at all. Read a lot of books, watch a lot of videos, Look at multiple perspectives and take from it what works for you. You do not have to carbon copy what any brand name magician is doing in their rituals or in their books. Take from it what works for you. And that might just be one tiny little aspect. It might be oh, okay, I'm going to use this offering and maybe, this little incantation widget here from this thing, and then just do my own thing. Think and do for yourselves and use your intuition. And you don't need my permission to do magic or anything in any particular way. I'm happy to give my opinion, obviously. It's why I have a YouTube channel, but you don't have, you don't have to follow my footsteps. I want you to think for yourselves. I want you to carve a practice that is yours and not, carbon copied, emulating anyone. Yes, you can draw inspiration from a number of sources. We all do. But at the end of the day, our practice is our practice. And finding what works for you. And that's why I started the whole accessibility magic series, is to, get people comfortable with that, because there's so many people that feel like they're not doing it right, or they want, some kind of scientific formula to get the desired results. And that's just not going to happen. Well, I mean, if it does, let me know, but I just don't think that there's any particular formulation, because we are so different. Each of us is so individually different. I mean, basically, down to the DNA, but, our lived experiences are different. We have different, cultural heritages and ancestry. We have different protectors. Sometimes we don't even know that we do. Like, it took me a long time to connect with my spirit guides, but, they're there now that I have them. I may have more for all I know, but, your ancestors. And not just talking about, my grandmother or my grandfather, like your ancestors from, 400 years ago might be, in your ancestral realm. And, going back that far, that could be a lot of people. And different cultures have different approaches to ancestor work. Some don't work with them at all. I think in Judaism, that's not a thing. You once you're dead, you're dead. You don't, you're not, calling upon your dearly departed auntie in that. It's just, that's, and in other cultures, ancestor work is intensely integrated into everyday life. So there's a wide variety of things. So, and that has to be taken into account when doing magic. And I think, as I said in in the Divine Timing video, sometimes those ancestors and spirit guides are going to steer you away from making a really bad decision. Because if you want to get back together with your narcissistic abuser ex, they're going to be like, how about no, maybe not. Let's not do that. So you can do all the spell work in the world to get back together with your narcissistic abuser ex, but you might not, or they might not allow for it. So you could just be spinning your wheels and thinking nothing's working, when it is, but just not in the way you expected. So in closing, I would like to say, again, think for yourselves, be able to interpret based upon your knowledge, your skill level, coupled with honing your practice on how to see and interpret the process, not to regurgitate something from a book or other well-known occultists. Distill your own interpretations and conclusions based on that knowledge and experience, knowing that things will vary wildly for every situation, for every spell, and every ritual. So that's just sort of my little, in a nutshell, of what I wanted to talk to you about, kind of how magic works. And there's a lot of different approaches to how magic works, but these are the things to kind of take into consideration with that, like the factors and variables. And things may not always work out the way you expect. So anyways, I'm Jennifer. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click like and subscribe, smash the notification button to get notified if YouTube actually does that. I don't think they actually, I very rarely ever get notifications for things. So anyways, love y'all.